Most salespeople don't have a territory plan. They have good intentions and a calendar full of noise. In this episode of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales, Kevin Lawson and Sean O'Shaughnessy lay out a simple, hard-nosed framework to map first-half revenue to specific accounts and build second-half pipeline before it becomes a crisis. You'll hear how to allocate time between key wins and marriage-level strategic accounts, and why your plan has to be built to survive getting punched in the face. If you want sales success driven by disciplined sales management, not hope, stay with us.
So I've said this quote before. Thomas Watson, the founder of International Business Machines, IBM, is famous for saying, even though I'm not sure he said it originally, he's famous for saying, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And we're a couple days into January. So you may be able to skip most of this episode if you have your act together. If you have your act together and you have already planned out your year, your 2026 year, then you're good. Listen to this as you're driving down the road and don't really pay attention. That's perfectly fine. Maybe you'll pick up a nugget. However, most of you, and I know salespeople pretty well, didn't put together a plan yet. They're still just going at it day by day. And that's just plain not good enough if you want to be ultra successful in sales. So I'm going to give you some ideas on a territory plan, not an account plan. Account plan is what we do with a specific account and how we're going to break into the account and how we're going to build value in the account, but a territory plan. And I don't care if your territory is 20 named accounts or 30 named accounts, or if your territory is a couple counties, a single city, a couple states, doesn't really matter. I want you to figure out how are you going to be successful. So I'm going to give you a couple ideas that I'll turn over to Kevin and he can keep on building on those ideas and maybe add some more. But the one thing I want you to figure out is what accounts are you going to sell to in the next 6 months? Now, I'm not saying you're going to sell to them the whole year, and I'm going to assume that you have a sales cycle that is somewhere less than 6 months of selling. So if it's somewhere less than 6 months of selling, and you're going to sell this account in 6 months, then everybody that you're going to sell to in the first half of the year, you probably already know. Just back to life. So I want you to list the companies that you are going to sell to and how much revenue you're going to get from each one of those companies. I want you to write that down. That's the very first thing I want you to do on your territory plan. The next part of your territory plan is, where are you going to find your accounts, your prospects for the second half of the year? So your prospects, where are you going to find them? Not what their names are, because you're prospecting, not how you're going to make an introduction to them and all the rest, not yet. I want you to just list out the 3, 4, 10 different ways that you are going to find prospects for the second half of the year. You probably still should maybe think May and June in that prospecting list. But remember, you just said you're going to close these deals in the first half of the year. So got to get both lists put together. So I gave you 2 lists. Now you got a lot of work to do. And now Kevin's going to build on it and give you some more work and give you some more ideas.
Right. So this is meant to be in addition to and instead of. So for those of you who have the nation as your territory, right, you probably have a set product or small set of products that you're selling into a very defined, think small box of target prospects. So if you're selling a solution, you have to cover a lot of ground. So when we say territory, we're not constraining you to just dirt. So when you hear us say territory, know that we may be thinking product, process, solution, product type, anything. We're using that synonymously. But I want you to think about the goal. So if you've got a blank sheet of paper or if you're envisioning this as you're driving, at the top of the sheet, write your goal. And just think about this as the account names and what they represent in terms of your focus. This is a time discussion. Who are my strategic accounts? The ones I'm going to focus a lot of time and effort on in the first half of the year. who are the key accounts? The strategic ones are ones like, hey, I need to win this to be successful long-term in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years. It could take you that long. Now, this extends the deal cycle. So Sean mentioned, what are you going to close in the first 6 months? Well, if it takes you more than 6 months to close a deal, you need to start thinking about what you're going to do to be successful in 2027 as well. And a seasoned, perennially successful salesperson thinks about these things. And we're early enough. We're only in the third week of January. This is like the 21st, 22nd, when you're listening to this. We need to be thinking much more long-term about how we're going to build success over time. When we're thinking at the strategic level, we're thinking about marriage level accounts. We want to marry ourselves and our success to theirs. So think about your territory in that frame. You've got new entrants coming into your territory. Maybe somebody's coming in from Canada, or somebody's coming into your state from another state. Someone's doing an acquisition. How are we aligning ourselves to that version of success? Now, again, I said top of the sheet, right goal. Underneath of that, you've written strategic, and then the percentage of time you're going to spend of your day and of your selling week and of your selling month seeking to acquire those accounts. The next header on about halfway down the page is key accounts. These are the ones that you know now. This is really where I nest and dovetail with what Sean said for the first half of the year, the who and how much. So these are your key accounts I must win that I already know about, that have an available opportunity for me. So what I've done here, if you go back and listen to last week and marry part of that discussion about networking and prospecting, finding a network that can introduce you to both key and strategic accounts will help you win in first half, second half, and longer term. Now we're starting to bake in a process for developing pipeline and closing it strategically and tactically. So this half of the year is a tactical kind of approach. You've got to do stuff to get stuff. That's a tactical approach. Strategic is, I'm going to invest 10% of my time into networking to build out my reputation so I am ready when those strategic accounts surface. They know that I'm a player. They don't have to wonder who's the player in this market. They know it because of my reputation. I've done the reputational groundwork to make sure I'm in line there. So thinking about whether you're selling a product, solution, a system of products, you can be selling regionally into a distribution type sale. Manufacturing, you're selling a system of products over and over and over, where you need to ship half a container load to a customer every week, or maybe one container load every 2 weeks, or whatever your volume is. You have to ship products, and that's a territory play. So you may scale this all the way back to Sean's initial statement. If I need to sell 48 truckloads this quarter, and I know this customer can take 1 truckload a week or 2 truckloads a month, or whatever the math is, you have to boil that down to, what is my territory plan? How am I going to get to my 48 truckloads per month or quarter, whatever your timeline is, to ensure success? And if you've only got 3 of those sold, you've got a lot of work to do. You've got a little bit of swinging out of your shoes. So you have to ask yourself, well, what is my pricing plan for my territory? Do I need to get noticed this quarter and then get stable next quarter and then get optimized the following quarter? Is your comp plan aligned to that? Can you suffer some low margin deals? Because the answer may be no, and you may have to go back to your leadership and go, hey, wait a minute, you asked me to open up this territory, and you're telling me I've got to be a premium priced product with a Me Too type solution? There's a conflict there. This is where we start to get into the real brass tacks of how we sell effectively, so that we can bring this full circle and say, what is my plan? Because the goal for today is, what is the plan? What is the plan for me to be successful? I know that I've got a quota. I've got an average deal size, or I've got a total deal volume. I've got something that says this is what success looks like for me as a seller. And now it's up to us as sellers and sales leaders to help the sellers make sure that this is well-appointed, actionable, reasonable, specific, think SMART goals here, and it aligns to the way we sell. MedPick, there's a cajillion philosophies for qualifying. Make sure that you're using one. Don't blend them. Don't overcomplicate something that doesn't need to be overcomplicated, but do what makes the most sense. If you're talking software, we're talking MedPick. If we're talking manufacturing, we may be talking something akin to that, neat, BANT, something simple, but just knowing that we got all the right people in them. But do the work. When we think about having a territory plan, plan your work your plan is something Frank Lawson was famous for saying, my father. Plan your work your plan. Another sales guy, he had the domestic market for exclusivity on manufacturing goods. So his plan was to turn up rep agencies regionally because he couldn't drive enough to get to all of them. So he stood up rep agencies, trained them, incentivized them to sell, gave them stock, and he developed a stocking plan to support their sales, and then he sold to his region. So his plan was to have key and strategic accounts, and then rep agencies with key and strategic accounts that they didn't fight over. And then he supported them with sales enablement tooling to be successful. So his plan every year was to get 1% better as a vendor to all of his rep agencies, as a sales agent for all his international suppliers, and 1% better as a value-added seller to the domestic market, and to prevent them from going direct, right? So part of his offense was defense, right? And thinking through all of those pieces of the pie is what you as sellers need to do. What are all the components of my success pie?
So it's great that you were talking about your dad, and you were also talking about numbers there a second ago. I am going to stop right now and tell you that your plan for 2026 has to equal or exceed your quota, what your boss's expectations are. You cannot plan this early in the year to be less than successful. So make sure you're doing that. I'm going to talk about my dad. My dad was a salesperson for the entire time that I knew him, at least. And he sold heavy construction equipment. And he knew that he had to sell a certain number of big things in order to make the number that his boss asked him to make. He had to sell a certain number of the biggest cranes out there, the biggest bulldozers out there. He knew he had to do that. And he knew which accounts he could do that with because he knew their business really well. And he was able to map those deals to their business. He knew what projects were coming up. He knew what things that were being bid out by the state and the county and the federal government. And that was what I want to start with here. Start knowing your customers. So as you build out your plan, I want you to think about what are the 5 companies that are in my territory, define territory any way your boss defined territory for you. What are the 5 companies within your territory that you are going to know more about that company than any other person in that company, with the exception of maybe the CEO? You're going to know how they make money, how they lose money, how their business drives. Are you going to get incredibly close to and really understand their business? Now, I'm intentionally not saying you should know that level of information about 30 companies. If you have a 30 company named account list, you're not going to pull it off. If you have a territory, you're not going to pull it off. You have a dirt territory defined by counties or states or whatever. You're not going to pull that off, but you can do 5. And hopefully the 5 will be on your top prospect list that we talked about and your top customer list that we talked about earlier, right? So I want you to know 5 companies better than any other employee of that company. How do they make money? What do they do? How does their process work? Know everything about them. Know who they sell to. Who are their competitors? Really understand 5 companies. And I tell you to do 5 because, first of all, it's really good to know that 5 companies that you really want to be close to. But it's also something that you can now say, I got 5 done. I can keep on doing this. Now I can get 6 and 7. So and we'll work on 6 and 7 and 10 later on. But let's just do 5. So what are the 5 companies? And I don't want you to answer the question today. I want you just to write down the list. And I started my last session, and we have about a minute left here before we have to say goodbye. But I started my last session talking about you have to have your expectations be, what are you going to do for the year? You got to make 100% of your quota. I'd actually argue, do 120%. Think big. You're doing a plan. And Mike Tyson, I guess this is our day for quotes. Mike Tyson famously said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. So you need to understand that your plan isn't going to work. Your plan is just your guidelines on how you're going to do your business. your plan is going to allow you to get punched in the face and still make 100% of your quota. So plan your plan for 120%. If you need help, you need guidance, you want to bounce some ideas off of people that isn't your boss, that isn't the coworker, that also isn't going to make quota this quarter, go to the B2B Sales Lab. There's a bunch of people on there. We're all sales leaders, sales people, marketing leaders, and say, this is what I'm thinking for my sales plan. Anybody want to beat it up? Anybody give me suggestions of what I'm missing? I guarantee if you put that question on the B2B Sales Lab, you will get great answers. You'll get great feedback. You will have the best plan that you have ever had, and you'll probably have a better plan than anybody else in your company. So check it out. You'll enjoy it. And check out our next week's episode, which is going to drop next Tuesday at 4:30. Make sure you're subscribed to our podcast, Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Thank you very much. Have a great day and happy selling.
That was a strong episode. Practical, direct, and the kind of conversation that leaves you with a plan instead of a pile of good intentions. One thing I took away immediately was the distinction between strategic accounts and key accounts, and how you allocate time differently. Strategic marriage-level accounts get deliberate, reputational investment because they shape your long-term runway, while key accounts get focused execution because there's an opportunity you can actually win this cycle. That time allocation discipline is sales management at its best because it prevents you from treating every account like an emergency and every week like it's week one. And don't miss the significant actionable item. Write a one-page territory plan today. Goal at the top, first half close list with expected revenue, second half prospecting channels, and then your 5 know them better than they know themselves companies. It matters because the plan forces clarity on revenue generation, not activity, and it exposes gaps before they become quota misses. Do it today, before the rush of the week turns "I'll get to it" into "I wish I had." If you ever want help with sales, sales management, or simply growing your company, reach out to Sean or Kevin. The contact info is in the show notes. And if you want a place to pressure test your approach, join the B2B Sales Lab, a community of salespeople and sales leaders helping each other succeed with real answers, useful resources, and accountability to make quota. The URL is in the show notes as well. Subscribe to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss the next conversation. We'll be back next Tuesday afternoon, Eastern Time. Happy selling!